Well, the rate rise that we've seen today is just another hammer blow to families across the country who are seeing their mortgages increase when it comes to remortgaging. At the moment, a family that's looking to remortgage their property is going to be paying, on average, more than £200 extra every single month, and for some people it's much more than that. Now, of course, the Bank of England have independence, and that's as it should be, but the government need to take responsibility for the fact that inflation in the UK is much higher than it is in comparable countries. In the US it's 3%, in the Eurozone it's 5.3%, and yet here in Britain inflation is stubbornly high at 7.9% because of a decade or more of mismanagement by the Conservative Party.
You say that, but the big spending commitments in recent years, which of those do you disagree with? Because you were happy for us to have a big expensive furlough package, to have an energy price guarantee. I haven't seen you oppose any tax freezes or tax cuts, so where have you been?
Well, there are three things that the government should have been doing that Labour would be doing right now to try and get inflation under control. Our anti-inflationary measures include boosting our energy security by investing in homegrown renewable energy and insulating homes to get down people's bills, sorting out the Brexit mess to reduce prices in our shops because extra bureaucracy and checks at the borders are pushing up prices for UK consumers. And also we need to help more people get back to work after the pandemic. But one thing government could be doing right now is making the mortgage support, forcing the banks to make that mandatory. At the moment it's a voluntary scheme. Hundreds of thousands of people risk slipping through the net and not getting the support they need. And the government should expand the windfall tax on the huge profits that energy giants are making. Those are two things government could be doing right now to ease some of the pain for people.
But closing the loophole in the windfall tax only raises a relatively small amount of money, and on mortgage help, your policy is effectively the same as the government. You're asking people to go to interest only or to have big long mortgages. I mean, would you want a 36-year mortgage?
So I think that the package of measures that Labour are putting forward are quite substantial. First of all, we could raise something like £10 billion more by extending the windfall tax, including closing those loopholes, which is a huge giveaway to the energy companies that are already making huge profits. And that money could help people right now with their gas and electricity bills. Although it's summer now, we'll soon be going into the autumn and winter, and people really notice those higher bills. And on mortgages, our package of measures would be mandatory, not voluntary. We need to force the banks and the lenders to give the support to customers that they need. Look, nobody wants to extend the term of their mortgage or go to interest only. But if the alternative is losing your home, then people need to be given those options. At the moment, that scheme is just voluntary. It should be mandatory.
But most banks don't want to see people default anyway. And the point is, there could be a package of help from the government. That's something that you don't seem to be in favour of, but you were when it came to helping people with their energy bills. Why not help struggling mortgage holders who are now paying hundreds more a month, as you point out rightly, through no fault of their own?
And that's why we need to force the banks to give the support to customers that they need. We also need to see banks passing on to customers the increase in these interest. But what about a package of support
from the government? Why not?
Well, what we need to do is to ensure that the banks are doing the right things, and that is two things. First of all, helping people that get into difficulties with their mortgages, and second, by passing on these higher interest rates in terms of the amount paid to savers at the moment. Those are two things that the banks should be doing, and government should be making banks doing. The government are asleep at the wheel, and banks need to do more to help their customers.
Okay, so no bailout for mortgage holders. Meanwhile, thousands of buy-to-let landlords, they say that they could be forced out of the market unless they pass on these rate rises to their tenants. Should the private rented sector be helped? And if so, what do you think the government should be doing? It's got other fiscal levers that it can pull. How would you help private renters and indeed landlords?
There's two things that needs to be done to help the private rented sector. First of all, the package of support that we've already spoken about for people with mortgages doesn't extend to people with buy-to-let mortgages, and that means that those higher mortgages are being passed on directly to tenants in the private rented sector. So that package of support that we want banks to be forced to give to their customers to also include the buy-to-let sector. But second, Labour would introduce a private rented charter to help people in the private rented sector. So the end to no-fault evictions, the end to being able to turf people out just to get a higher return on your mortgage, to give more rights
the
to
government's
people
also
in the private
in favour
rented
of
sector.
that policy, ending Section 21 as well.
The government have had 13 years to fix this mess, and all we've seen is low growth confirmed by the Bank of England today, the highest interest rates in 15 years and the highest inflation in the G7. That is the record of this Conservative government. They've had 13 years, they're out of ideas, out of time, and they're soon out of office.
An energy crisis, a war in Ukraine.
The thing is,
things that you would have to deal with in power as well.
The thing is, every country in the world has faced those things, whether it's the US, other European countries, or here in Britain, have all faced the implications of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, have all faced a pandemic. And yet what you see in those countries is inflation much lower, and in most cases growth much higher. It is an indictment of this government that we've got a combination now in Britain of high interest rates, high inflation, and growth that is on the floor, and that is an indictment of this Conservative
something feeding
government.
into that is the impact Brexit's had. We're expecting a further delay on checks to EU food imports. Would you scrap these altogether if you took power, given where food prices are just now?
The government are right to delay these because these would only put further upward pressure on prices if they were introduced. But we need to go further. The government's botched Brexit deal a couple of years ago has pushed up prices for UK consumers in our shops, food prices, the prices of medicine and drugs. And as a result, that is one of the contributing factors that means inflation is higher here in Britain than it is in other European countries. That's why we would use the review of the Trade and Cooperation Agreement with the EU to fix some of those holes in the Tories' Brexit mess, to get a better deal for UK businesses and also UK consumers, and see prices lower in our shops.
We are just kicking it into the long grass though by delaying it. Meanwhile, we've got vans full of dodgy meat potentially getting into the UK quite easily. Are you not worried about that? Because farmers are, and so are vets.
What I want to do is to look at the whole of the opportunities. For example, at the moment, food prices in the UK and medicine prices in the UK are higher than they need to be because of the additional checks that didn't exist before we left the European Union. But I can understand why farmers are concerned, because there are checks on their goods going into the European Union, but there's not checks on goods coming into the UK.
But you're happy to keep that going.
That's why Labour want to negotiate a veterinary deal to help our food and farming sectors to be able to export without the bureaucracy, without the checks, and without the extra costs that they are incurring today. That is how the Labour government would help our food and farming industries here in Britain.
Okay, one more question on interest rates, and then I've got one local one as well, if that's
sure.
all right. So some unnamed Conservative MPs are reported today saying that people just need to accept being poorer for a while if we want to get a grip on inflation. Are they right?
I find those sorts of comments incredibly out of touch with the really challenging times that so many families are facing. We wouldn't need to be poorer if the government would just manage our economy properly, sort out the mess of the failed Brexit deal, boost our energy security by insulating homes and investing in renewable energy and helping people get back to work. If we do those things, that package of anti-inflationary measures, we could help secure our economy, improve the number of good jobs and reduce bills for consumers.
But do you agree that we can't dampen demand without putting up interest rates?
There are other things that government could do, like the windfall tax to help people with their energy bills, and like forcing the banks to pass on this support to their customers. It doesn't have to be this way. We don't have to accept low growth, high inflation and high interest rates as the only outlook for the UK economy. I'm so much more ambitious for our economy than that. We can get good jobs, greater security, lower bills and lower prices in our shops if we take forward the plans that Labour have set out.
Lastly, you're here in the southwest. These interest rate rises have seen drops in house prices everywhere, and this is one of the worst affected areas. The news today means that house prices will probably fall even more. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, given how much they soared since 2020?
I think there's a real challenge for people who own their own homes, who are now seeing interest rate rises at the same time that the value of their asset, their home, is declining. That's a double whammy for homeowners. We need to get a grip of this crisis by tackling inflation, helping people with their mortgages, and properly taxing the energy companies to help people with their bills.
So you don't want to see house prices fall in the southwest?
I want house prices to be affordable, and that means building more homes, which this government has failed to do. And also, when new homes are built, make them available for local people, because so many people here in the southwest, particularly in some of the beauty spots, struggle to get onto the housing ladder because people are buying homes as second homes. We need more of the new homes that become available to be available for local buyers, for the local community.
And do you think it's going to be easier or harder for first-time buyers? Because on the one hand, they've now got more expensive mortgages, but on the other hand, house prices are coming down.
It's clearly a nightmare for people who are trying to get on the housing ladder at the moment, having to build up higher deposits and facing monthly costs that are higher. And that is because of a failure of the government to build homes and because of a failure to get a grip of inflation, which is seeing interest rates rise for the 14th consecutive time, now to a 15-year high. A real challenge for existing homeowners, but also for those who dream to get on the housing ladder and seeing that dream slip further out of reach.
Are interest rates high enough to halve inflation, as Rishi Sunak is promising he'll do?
Look, I want inflation to come down. It's really important that happens. That's why Labour have put forward measures around energy security, fixing the Brexit
but specifically, are interest rates high enough to get there? That's what I'm asking.
That's the decision of the Bank of England. The Bank of England were made independent by the last Labour government. It's right that they set interest rates.
But you don't have an opinion on it, is that correct?
Well, it's really important that politicians don't interfere with the operational independence of the Bank of England.